If your brokerage is also trying to scale, here are some tips about what your TMS needs to be. Cloud-based for easy access anywhere. Have all your broker tools on one screen. Seamless integrations with all load boards and capacity tools. Built for both truckload and LTL loads. Free to update. And no lag time, no crashes, with easy to export highly detailed data reporting. Schedule a demo now and ask about getting your first month free.
I got friends only wanna talk business. I got expensive, cause winning's expensive. I got expensive, cause winning's expensive. I've been reading all the work, and I've been shutting down the stars.
And welcome to Put That Coffee Down, the freight sales show for closers. I'm your host today, as always, Kevin Hill, and we have an exciting jam-packed show for you today with Omar Singh, founder and president of Surge Transportation. We're going to talk about driving value as a freight broker. Certainly, it's not on price. It is about picking the right spots, the right way to help out your shipper customers. So Omar just wrote an article on FreightWaves.com about that, so you can go to FreightWaves.com and check that out. The name of the article is All Machines Need Maintenance. Your broker is the mechanic and not the operator. So we're going to talk about economies of scale in trucking and also about overflow freight and what a great opportunity it is for that. First off, let's go over to the Freight Tech 100 nominations. Those opened on July 5th, so it's been well over a month now. So those last until August 26th. So here in a little over 2 weeks, we'll be closing those down, then sending those over to our special panel of industry leader experts to vote on the top 25. And then we announce those November 3rd. At F3 here in Chattanooga, Tennessee. 3 days of jam-packed fun, all about the future of freight. So if you haven't nominated anyone, your favorite tech vendor, your own company, then please go to FreightWaves.com and do that today. And let's also talk about TIE software, right? So TIE TMS saves 3PLs and freight brokers an average of over 2 hours a day per rep with a smooth workflow designed to help you speed up your process and scale the growth of your brokerage. With a centralized platform integrated with your load boards, rating tools, and carrier compliance, TIE TMS customers see an average 30% increase in monthly shipment volume. Visit TIE-software today to schedule a demo, and that is TAI-software.com. So go there today, schedule a demo with the great guys and gals from TIE Software. So with those introductions out, let's bring on Omar to the show to talk about being a mechanic.
Yeah, something like that. So
how are you doing these days, Omar?
Doing great. I love the frames. I think it's the first time I've seen them.
Yeah, everyone's making fun of me with these frames, calling me Harry Carey. So if I'm going to be called anything in life, Harry Carey's not a bad
yeah,
person.
I'm not making fun of you. I like him. I appreciate him. So
thank you. And you're sharply dressed as always. The sharpest dressed man in freight, I always say.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So let's get down to business and talk about your article that you published a couple weeks ago on FreightWaves.com. And that is All Machines Need Maintenance. Your broker is the mechanic, not the operator. So if we take a 30,000 feet view of the title of the article and the theme, what would you boil it down to, Omar?
Well, I think it boils down to fundamentally, and I talk about this and not everybody does it, but I think that brokers should not try to replace primaries. I don't think they should compete against primaries. I think they should strategically position themselves with their customers to say, look, when your primaries aren't available, I can be here, I can flex, I can swell, I can surge, I can do all these things that you need me to do, but I have to acknowledge that the majority of the work is going to be done by primaries, and I can't replace them, and I don't want to replace them in our relationship. A lot of those relationships are so strong. I mean, it's not even worth trying to. So I use the analogy as a mechanic because we kind of step in and we tweak and repair and we do routine maintenance, but we don't really drive the machine 90% of the time. At least that's our business model, and I preach it on the hilltops. But a lot of people are.
And I agree
going after
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. I know as a freight broker, we were often encouraged to go in and try to take business from the primary, usually asset-based, large enterprise fleets, especially if you're talking to enterprise value customers, right? Like a billion
Right.
or more of revenue, right? You're not going to replace the enterprise fleets that are servicing them. You're not going to take
Right.
lanes. You're not going to be competitive. You might be able to compete. Well, it gets back to the price issue, right? Is that you can't offer the service that they do usually with drop trailer programs and things like that. But you have surges, right? Surge transportation.
Right.
You have surges. You have seasonality. You have the overflow freight that should be your bread and butter as a freight broker.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. And listen, we've always sold on it, and I think that it makes for a more valuable partnership as well because they don't have to hold their primaries necessarily to expectations that are unreasonable, for one reason or another. Let's say the loads aren't tendered evenly that week and the carriers just don't have trucks. So rather than get upset, you kind of go to your strategic provider who might be, just a little bit more than a primary, but still completely reasonable and somebody who you want to work with. And it just keeps things flowing. And I think it makes for a cleaner partnership, so when they call on you, there's a special need, and we're kind of held to very high standards as well. And so long as we deliver, that's okay. But
it is. It is. My philosophy, it was much the same as a freight broker. I didn't necessarily want to win all the business from one customer. I just wanted to pick the lanes and the opportunities that made the most sense for me and
Right.
delivered value to the customer as well, right? Things I could cover, that I could have stable rates on, that I was good at, right? I had the carrier connections for that, which brings value to my customer and also to myself, and have several customers and pick those pockets of where I could excel at and be better than everybody else. And it just made life easier than trying to take business away from the primaries or the status quo carriers, who oftentimes there wasn't a problem with. So why am I trying to sell against them all the time?
Right. Yeah, and I think a lot of times people don't realize, I guess luckily been doing this for a couple of decades more, since I opened my first trucking company. But I think a lot of times people don't realize how established some of these relationships are, with primaries and drop trailers, and how well they know the network. And it's not just a price thing that would knock them out for a couple of pennies. I mean, there has to be a major disruption for a serious primary to be replaced. And it's, just trying to go in and undercut them by a nickel or a dime or whatever it is. I mean, it's just kind of meaningless when it comes to somebody who's been in your network for 20 years. So then, how do you have a conversation about value when that's what you're up against? And what we try to say is, well, we'll help them because we'll supplement the things that they're not able to do. We're not going to compete against them. We know our place, and they're primaries for a reason by definition. So we're going to try to provide value where they're not able to. And, I don't know. I've always liked the analogy about kind of the mechanic and doing maintenance and breakdown repair, but letting them be the real drivers of the majority of the freight. So,
I think that's a great niche, right? I mean, it's the riches are where the niches are where the riches are, and that is picking where you can add value and being the mechanic in a system, helping with any breakdowns or struggles. You can get real consistent, reoccurring business just by doing that.
right. Yeah,
Yeah. So,
and I'll tell you, go ahead. Sorry.
oh no,
No,
no, go
I
ahead.
was talking. No, I was going to say, I think over the years, we've just had a much better experience, and I think the customers who we work with find it refreshing when you go to them with that sort of understanding and saying,
Yeah.
this is where I think I can provide value. This is where I can support your primaries, or this is where I can support your network. And a lot of people say, wow, most people don't offer that or don't sell on it and don't want it, and it allows for a more meaningful partnership, I think.
Yeah,
So
I think it's that mentality of going into a customer and trying to trying to get as much business as possible, right? And oftentimes that means trying to displace the status quo, trying to displace the primary carriers or freight brokerages or contracts that they have on file, getting in on that RFP bid, and it doesn't really make all that much sense. I mean,
yeah,
because it will happen. You're going to run into people who are displeased with the service they're getting right now. They might give you a shot um, at displacing some of those regular routes, but oftentimes it's they're struggling with something. Find out what they're struggling with, and be able to just fix that one, two, three things. I think in the article it was at 10%. 10% of loads is kind of a number that you throw out there.
yeah, I think that's just the historical average tender reject,
Hmm.
right? They just somewhere between, call it 8 and 12, depending on the year and the environment. And of course, during COVID, we saw much higher numbers, and now they're back to historical norms. So I think for us, I mean, I don't want to say it's refreshing, because it's not, being in a kind of freight recession or everything that's going on right now. But
Hmm.
it's kind of, we're back to historical norms, and do we have a business model that's sustainable in a historical norm? And the answer is yes. And so I think that's the good news, because kind of with all of the rapid growth and extra volume during COVID, everyone says, well, what happens when things normalize? And well, when they normalize, we'll do what we've been doing for the last 10 years, so it's operating in 10% space rather than 40% space. And so I guess that's the good part. But yeah, even, in truckload, so we do mostly truckload. And so our diversification, when everyone's trying to grab as much primary business as possible, I call our kind of seven service lines to be primary, backup, API, seasonal, spot, expedite, and there's one other I'm forgetting right now. I shouldn't, but then other guess companies take a different approach, and they'll say, well, our service lines are drayage and intermodal and air and truckload and LTL, and so that's a different way of being kind of, it's still going after
Hmm.
primary. You know what I mean? But
Yep.
different service lines. And I think for us, it's none of that's primary, just a little bit, but is really trying to figure out where we can do other things that need just attention. So,
Yeah, I mean, I think seasonality and expedited. If you're a freight broker out there, I mean, those are two of the first things you really should be focused on whenever you're calling on prospects or even your own customers, right? Is finding out, certainly you should know the seasonal, ups and downs of any industry that you're selling freight into or selling capacity into, I should say. So you should have a handle on that, but expedite too. I mean, those are the high margin loads, right? You can move more loads and make more margin, and have a better value prop than you can when you're a kitchen sink type of approach where you're all things to all
right.
people, and you're going after those core lanes that you're never going to be able to really sniff at for years if you're even that lucky.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, I think, while we still have a little bit of time, it's just worth mentioning, APIs are now kind of a big part of our relationship and TMS integrations. But, what I talk about in the article is all that has done is really change the speed of the transaction, but it hasn't changed the nature of the relationship to say, I'm going to operate in a space that's strategically valuable to you. That hasn't changed about our business model. We're just processing the information more quickly. But fundamentally, I don't think the business model has changed as part of it. It's a little bit more attractive to have an integrated partner and get the, response time down from, whatever, 1 hour to 1 minute. But the nature, the purpose for the relationship hasn't changed like at all. We're still doing the same things. So
How adopted are APIs now? I know when I got in the business 10 years ago, you never. I mean, though they didn't really even exist in trucking. It seemed like, or at least not from my point of view on a broker's floor. But now it was more EDI and things like that. Uh, how much of a market share or how commonly used are APIs now, and kind of the life cycle of getting those set up and the full integrations. Have you seen uh, that be a easier and swifter process over the last couple of years?
I think over this year, with the market changing, the willingness to adopt APIs on the shipper side is, as they're becoming more well known and as there are more service providers who are doing it, I think, they're willing to take a chance because, the last 2 years the market was going up. So contract rates were always lower than market rates. So anytime a shipper would accept turning on APIs, they'd kind of also accept that they're probably going to be paying higher than their contract rates. And right now, since the market's in decline, contract rates are higher than market rates. So I think I'm seeing more willingness in 2022 for people to say, well, maybe I should take advantage and save a little bit of the money that kind of we overspent in the last 10 years or 2 years, and take advantage of some market rates by activating APIs. So that's hard, and I think it's a hard competitive environment to operate in for carriers and brokers. It's, I think, resulting in more widespread adoption of shippers being willing to say, okay, if I can save money, I'll do it. But if all I was going to do was going to spend more money, even though it gets me capacity faster, there was much more of a reluctance. So probably both, just the evolution of APIs along with market conditions. We're starting to see more adoption this year.
So when I look into Sonar, I see the spread between contract and spot rates at negative anywhere from 90 cents to 95 cents a mile. And that's excluding fuel. That is a huge spread that we really haven't seen over 5-6 years, at least since we've been tracking the data in Sonar. Are you starting to see, whether it's retail or CPG customers come in and maybe talk about renegotiating contracts with their key providers, or, the uptick in API activity, taking advantage of lower spot market rates? Have you been seeing that over the last couple months, and do you expect it to continue through 2022?
Yeah, I think we're seeing a little bit of all of it, right? I mean, we're seeing shippers come to us, not just, but also their primaries, and renegotiating rates in a collaborative way by saying, listen, this is what we gave you the rate at, and we don't want to remove you, but we want you to come closer to market. So I wouldn't say that's rebidding it, that's renegotiating it. We're also seeing rebidding altogether. I've seen some very large customers just say, okay, we're holding the awarded rates for 60 days and we're just rebidding everything to adjust to the market. I've seen that. I've seen more shippers go to real-time rates, which aren't necessarily spot, but they're kind of living in the routing guide. And if the primary rejects it, maybe rather than go to first backup or second backup, to go into an API provider if the rate is better. So, I mean, yeah, I'm seeing all kinds of every strategy possible to say, we don't want to disrupt our primaries. We don't want to disrupt, the established sort of functioning part of the supply chain that much, but where we can maneuver and save money and maybe recover a little bit of the overspend from the last 2 years. I'm seeing it in every way. And I think it'll continue. I don't know how long this freight market will stay how it is, but I think throughout it, there's going to be a constant renegotiation. And to be fair, I mean, in 2020 and 2021, it was a renegotiation on the carrier and broker side. So, I was speaking on a panel last week, and one of our shipper customers was on there, and she said that, the markets used to kind of shift, the pendulum would shift, and now what we're seeing is it's shifting faster and it's shifting higher. So whereas it used to be a 3-year cycle, now it's maybe a 1.5-year cycle, and it's not just shifting like this, but it's shifting like this. And I really kind of appreciated that analogy because it is what we're seeing, right? This just, I hate to use the word.
I love the pendulum.
Right.
Yeah, I love the pendulum analogy, right? Because this is supposed to be balanced, but a pendulum is very rarely balanced, right? And it
Right.
swings up above what you would call a correction on the upside,
Right.
and on the downside, it's an extreme move as well. And I think that's certainly what we've been seeing over this last cycle. I don't know if it's um, pandemic singularity, maybe just because how extreme that situation was, or if we're going to see this in other ups and downs in the market as well going forward. Maybe in a couple of years, or depending on what event happens.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I saw it through the recession, through, when I had the trucking company, and you lose capacity in markets like this. People either properly go out of business or just decide that it's not worth it. And then once enough capacity is lost, then the balance of supply and demand shifts, and kind of it goes back in the other direction again. And when rates get so good, all this capacity starts coming back, and then there's too much capacity for the supply and for the demand. Sorry.
Free market.
And yeah, so it just
It's
keeps happening.
I think that's one of the reasons why I like the trucking market so much, is that it's a free market. It's about as close to a free market as we have in the world. Before we go, I know I kind of want to start off with this, but economies of scale. Can we talk about economies of scale and kind of difficulties of achieving those in trucking?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's why I mentioned that I don't think it's even worth it for a broker or a small fleet to try to necessarily compete against established primaries, because they can do everything for less. Their fuel discounts are substantially, less expensive to buy fuel than average small or medium-sized carrier. Their cost of maintenance and repairs from having their own shops, or their volume discounts on tires and parts, and just any economy of scale that they can have in trailer maintenance and trailer purchases and fleet asset purchases is just so much. There's so much cost savings in that compared to what a small or medium-sized person can get, or a broker who just has no economies of scale. So it's just silly to say I'm going to undercut this person who is just true, who can operate for so much less because they have discounts built into volume purchases. And most people don't. So how can you compete on price?
You really can't, but people try, and new people come in the industry, and that's about all they can do is try to undercut in price, and it just never works out, because you undercut enough, you win the business, and then you have a different set of problems, is that you won the business, and you can't you can't move the freight, or certainly you might hire people that you shouldn't hire to move the freight, and you have all of those situations. So really quickly, we have a couple minutes left here. Uh, what's your one big theme for the rest of 2022 and maybe 2023?
So, I mean, we're still really kind of full speed ahead on APIs. So we still have some events and conferences where we're speaking on kind of the differences between now, not just API and spot, but spot APIs and real-time APIs, which are kind of part of inserting into the waterfall rather than after the waterfall fails. So kind of trying to bring more awareness to that, and bring more awareness to TMS integrations. And I mean, what I hope to see is just more digitization of supply chain and more APIs. But while we're seeing more adoption, I will say that I don't think most shippers are thinking that all of their service providers are going to be enabling APIs in the next few years. And I kind of think that they should, and we should. they seem to have an appetite for saying we'll work with a few API providers. So it'll be interesting to see where it goes. But
it will.
I'm
It'll always be
yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the great things about this industry is always interesting because you never know where it's going to go. But thank you for joining us today, Omar. Omar Singh, founder and president of Surge Transportation. You can find him at surgetransportation.com. Thanks again.
Great to see you, Kevin. All right.
Good to see you too, Omar. And that will wrap it up for this episode of Put That Coffee Down. You can download the podcast at Freightcast, and you can catch us here on FreightWaves TV every Tuesday, 12 p.m. Eastern Time. And with that, I will see everyone next week. Go out, make some margin.
I got friends only wanna talk business. I got expensive, cause winning's expensive. I got expensive.